Hello, and welcome to the Unwind Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Dusky. Now that a dirty pull up has been added to my beautiful space outside and my coffee is lukewarm, it's time to get started. We'll see um, how far I make it into this before other humans emerge from their slumber. Um, but I felt inspired to go ahead and get this done, so here we are. It's 6:44 on a Friday morning. Friday mornings are my favorite. And we're going to talk about meditation. I really had to take myself back to when I discovered and felt the urge to just seek out something. It was a really, really difficult time in my life. And while it wasn't really all that long ago, it feels like it was so long ago simply because of like the progress I've made and how far I've come since those moments. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about of like where I was when I was seeking something else, something something to help, anything to help, because I simply just could not be and continue to live on the way that I was feeling. It was debilitating. Is that a right word? I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it was paralyzing. And so I want to kind of explain to you where I was, and I had to go back and like read the thoughts from that Shannon at that time to kind of really understand and be able to reiterate it to you. So there were a few moments that stick out. My husband and I had been trying to have a baby for a little over a year. And it was really hard on us. It was hard on me. It was also in a time where my work was stressful. And I knew that that was the work that I wasn't really supposed to be doing anymore as well. So it was all these things kind of on top of each other. I was working at home, and my emotions and my hormones, I think, were just like everywhere and ever present. Because it was just cycle after cycle of not conceiving. And if you've been there, you know the heartbreak of that. And trying to manage yourself during all of those emotions is really hard especially when you're feeling like it's something about your self-worth, that I'm crying all the time because I'm a crier, when it's something that you identify with. And as like, this is just who you are. Like, why am I not strong enough? Why can't I do this? Why is everybody else around me doing life just fine? And I remember this moment so vividly that I literally was just sitting in my hallway one day, like work day, normal day, crying. No idea. Like at this moment, I don't know what even spurred it or if there was even a reason, but I was just crying and crying and crying and crying. And I couldn't get off. Like, I felt like it was just paralyzing. I didn't know what to do. It was hard to even get myself up off the floor. It was almost like I was like, do I just call somebody close so they can just like hold my hands and like get me up? And it's hard to like take myself back to that again because of how far it came. Sorry. Um, but it was that day that like I reached out to a therapist for the first time, and I was just like, I don't know what I need, but I need something. and I don't know how to go about this, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't even know, but like, I need help. And it's funny because I've been listening to a really great book that says, like, when you're in that time, like, those are the only 3 words you need. If you're having a hard time and you're just overwhelmed and overcome with emotions that you just feel like normal day isn't working, the only 3 words you need are, I need help. So eventually I made my way off that, clocked out for the day because there was no working that was going to be happening. And I remember it was sometime in the summer. I was like, you know what I can do today? I can make little ice cream cones. Like, I had to make these little prize packs for things and they would get a free snow cone. So I was cutting out little things, and that's literally what I did. Like, I drew snow cones on a big piece of poster board and cut them out. And I was like, I can do that today. So I just wanted to give you a little hindsight of like where I was in that moment and what I was kind of searching for. And, after a few therapy sessions, I kind of came out of it, and I came across meditation and breathing probably in several different ways. But one that really hit home was Drew and I were in Salina, and I was in the bookstore in the mall. I wonder if that still exists because we all know the status of malls at this point. And I came across this book called Real Happiness by Sharon Salzberg. And it's like a 4-week, introduction to meditation. But it took me well over 4 weeks to read because I really, truly believe that God kind of gave me each piece when he knew I was ready for it. But it guided me through just this very simple way to reconnect with yourself, to explore the idea of meditation, and also like the explanation behind it. And I really enjoy, honestly, the science behind meditation and how it actually makes up your brain. But I think that that's another podcast. One of the biggest lessons that I learned from that book was that you are not your emotions. Emotions are not good. They are not bad. They just are. Emotions just exist. And that was the biggest message that I needed because I felt like I wasn't even myself. I didn't feel like myself. I was crying all of the time. And so I was just like, is this just who I am now? Like this sad, angry person? Like, is that who I am? And I think every time I had these spells, I was beating myself up. I'm like, Shannon, get your shit together. Like, why can't you handle this? Like, you can handle this. Big deal. People go through this all the time. Like, caught up in that, like, judging myself for having emotions. And I think that's a common thing, especially for women, because we are emotional beings. We are. And it's beautiful and it's glorious because God made us that way. And what a joy to be able to experience such a vast majority of emotions. Like, emotions are the soul's way of communicating with us. And our ability to process through that is very important. But going back to what I learned was that you are not your emotions. Your emotions are not good or bad. They just are. And the metaphor that made it make sense was, if you're crying, that doesn't mean you're a sad person. Similar to like, if your elbow hurts, you don't say, I'm a sore elbow, which is so funny. Like, and so I just continued to remember that, emotions are going to come up. They're not forever, even though sometimes it really feels like they are. And they need to be released. They're going to come up whether we acknowledge it or not. And so the ability to learn how to acknowledge those emotions and not judge them and just be with them for what they are is empowering. And meditation, I feel like, really guides you to do that in a way that like you don't even realize. And so that's kind of how I came across it. And that was probably back in 2015, 16. So it's been 6-7 years now. And as I've grown, like my meditation practice has shifted. There's been a lot of change in my life over the last 6 years, 7 years. I've added 3 humans to the mix. And we all go through these seasons where our self-care is different. You know, there were times where I could meditate for 20 minutes at a time. There are times where I use guided meditations. Like I've got an app on my phone that I use. There are still times where I use all of these different tools because there's no right or wrong way to do it. The whole premises behind it is just the whole intention behind it is to simply just sit and be and know that you are worthy just because you exist. That you don't have to do anything to be anything, but like you are accepted and you are grounded just because you exist. And sitting and grounding yourself for just a moment before we go off and do all of the things, like, unless you've really tried it, it's hard to experience what it does for you. Here recently, I had somebody ask me, like, what do you do? Like, because there's a few Friday mornings where Norley goes to daycare and all the kids were in school. And they're like, what do you do when all your kids are, away? I'm like, I sit by my tree for a minimum of 10 minutes before I do anything else. I'm about to be interrupted here. So what I feel like that does for me is it just like grounds me. And rather than going throughout my day with all this frantic energy of like, I got to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And if I don't get it done, then like, what have I even accomplished for the day? And I feel like as women, like that's a really big deal because we always have this like nagging to-do list, right? But there's certain ways we can go about it. Like you can go about it with frantic energy. And then what is that day? Like, what are the emotions you're experiencing throughout that day? Like you're overwhelmed, you're frantic, you're not present, you're just trying to do all the things, which we all do. But there's this piece when you've sat for a moment and just allowed whatever is to be what it is. And you have your to-do list. And what gets done, gets done. And what doesn't, there's another day for. And what's in front of you, you're present with. And you've sat for a moment to really just be with yourself and what your true heart's, like what your heart's true priorities are, which is for me, like, how do I want to feel today? Yes, I have this to-do list and I can go about it in a couple different ways. I can go about it frantically overwhelmed, feeling like a failure if I don't get it done. Or I can go about it with my heart's intention, which is there are these things to do. And I'm going to show up and be who I want to be today. And I want to be present. I want to be here. I want to be happy. And I don't want to be frantic and overwhelmed. And in order to do that, I'm going to do what's in front of me. I'm going to do the next right thing each little time. And we're going to see where we end up at the end of the day. And that energy shift is hard to explain, but very much felt. And so I put meditation in a piece these are some of the reasons why. I really geek out when you get into like the brain stuff as to why, but it's simply a tool that I have found that when my days are starting to become days that I don't enjoy, that I don't like, that I'm not really very happy with, or I'm starting to feel overwhelmed or frantic, or um, maybe it's I'm getting frustrated with my kids more often, maybe it's other things. But what I found is when I get to those days that seem to be more and more and more of those overwhelmed, exhausting, high emotion days, and I'm like, have I been meditating? The answer is mostly no. And so incorporating that now into a daily practice, right now I'm kind of at a bare minimum. Like I sit in the morning for 5 minutes a day. This morning I sat for 10. How could I record a podcast on meditating without meditating first? But even like that consistency of maybe it's just a minute, maybe you take a big deep breath, maybe you take 3, just a minute at a time, working up to different things as seasons change or as your body and your emotion and your heart feels is needed. It's different. It changes the game. And I believe there's a power in also meditating with other people. I head out to my Fred's shed every now and he'll guide me through a meditation. It's glorious. I'm hoping that he'll join us and guide us through a meditation at the retreat if it works for his schedule. But it's also an important reason why I incorporated it into the retreat amongst the other things was this is probably the most practical, game-changing element that we can work into our daily lives that will help us live a happier and more joyful day by day, minute by minute. And out at the retreat location, I love morning sunrises because I feel like it's the reminder that every single day is a new day, and every single day the sun comes up, and every single day, again and again, we have the opportunity to define who we are and how we're living and what we want out of this life. And that's why I really just enjoy the sunrise meditation, because it's so beautiful and you just get to bask in God's beauty. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I hope that you've enjoyed the stories, enjoyed the why, the intention behind it. My humans are emerging from their slumber. So enjoy your day, friends.